Sean.
Marco.
We are here to deliver a message from the RSA conference team.
It's an important message from our friends. RSA Conference 2025, just around the corner, where insights drive action, solutions emerge, and community connections spark innovation. You'll be there. I'll be there. We invite everybody else to be there April 28th through May 1st. You can secure your spot at rsaconference.com/ITSPMAG25. That's ITSPMAG25. See you all there.
I'll be there. See you there. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Audio Signal Podcast. This is Marco Ciappelli. And you know me, I hope, unless it's the first time that you see the show or listen to the show. But hopefully, because not too long ago, I published the first interview with my friend, Stephen Jay Schwartz, which is here with us. If you're watching, here it is. If you're listening, here it is. Hey, Stephen, how are you doing?
Hey, guys. How you doing, Marco?
Well, welcome back. That's what I was going to say. They should know you by now. And if they don't stop this. But when you're done with this, you can go and listen to the first episode.
It was a great conversation, too.
I know.
I enjoyed it, yeah.
I had a great time. And I'm going to do a little bit of background here, which is, if they haven't heard that, we have been knowing each other for a long time. We're connected through living in the South Bay, working at coffee shops, not serving coffee, but writing or creating, doing something creative there, and chatting, sometimes in the weekend or late at night, or like a fantastic creative environment, and that's why we reconnected, and we're talking about stories and storytelling, and you as a storyteller. So
yeah, we would sit at the cafe and each do our own work, and then that's why I love writing in cafes. I mean, writing is such a lonely job that I have to do it in public among friends, because otherwise you're too isolated. So at a cafe, we would sit there and do our own work, and then I would get exhausted at a certain point. I need a break, and then Marco would need a break, and then we get up and walk outside, walk around the cafe a little bit, have a conversation, and then when we have our energy back and our purpose back, we go back to our own projects.
Yeah, and oftentimes you'll have somebody else join in too, and it's crazy to think how many times is just when you don't think about what you want to think about, that you think about. Yeah, I made a little mess there, but I think I
think I know what you're thinking. No, it's actually, when you take a step away and you have a conversation about something else, the story is still working its way around in the back of your head. Mm-hmm. So like the problem that you were facing when you were sitting down at the table, you give it the opportunity to work in your subconscious, basically. And then kind of the middle of our conversation about something else, I would say, okay, I got to go now, because the solution has occurred in the amount of time.
Yeah. Oh, those are a good time, and I still think about doing that is a great way to be surrounded by. It's an energy that stays in the room, I think.
Yes.
I mean, even if you're all looking at your own screen, you're in your head. For me to know that I'm not the only one doing that, it kind of, you share the vibe. Let's put it that way. Very LA. You're sharing the vibe.
It's very LA. There was a cafe, a big 2-story, very large Victorian house-looking cafe in Venice, Santa Monica area that was around for 25 years or something, called the Novel Cafe.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
Oh, it was the best. It was just, it's an era now because it's gone. But I would go there. It would be open until 2 a.m. Sometimes it was open 24 hours, and they would let you stay for 10 or 12 hours on one single cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. And all the writers in town, whether they're screenwriters or novelists or TV writers or writing poetry or professors or whatever, everyone would be there all the time. And that was the most vibrant, exciting room to be in. And I always would, I'd find my little spot, my favorite spots, and write. And then I'd get up, and, a number of different creative people would get up and take their breaks, and we'd all have a conversation. And the people who smoked would smoke their cigarettes, and then we'd all go back to our seats. And I could do this, back in the day, I could write for 12 hours and get about 6 hours of good work, done during that time.
Yeah.
So
And networking too, which is always
and
a good thing to do, right?
yeah, just making friends too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Steve, last time we talked about a little bit about your story, so we don't need to go back in there, although we can do a quick bio that you can share. We talk about your books, but there's many things that you do, and one you teach at the Emerson College,
Emerson.
and you have your presentations and talks about the musicality of writing, and you started by also writing script or editing script for visuals. So I want this conversation today to kind of mix the different senses, kind of like a synesthesia, right?
Mm.
With the music and the visuals and the words, and maybe what we can achieve by just writing. And then if there is a different angles that is needed to look at things, or if it just come out. But let's start with that. 2 minutes of who is Stephen Jay Schwartz for those who didn't listen to the first episode, and then we dive into this topic.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I had two loves as a kid growing up. I was making Super 8 films with my buddies. Was one of them, and the other one was music. I played saxophone. So I had these two passions growing up, and then when it was time to go to college, I chose to go to a music school, jazz school in Texas called North Texas State University. Now it's called the University of North Texas. A really kind of top tier jazz school. Like if you ever seen the movie Whiplash, it was very much like that kind of school. And I spent a year there before I realized that what I really wanted to do was make films. I kind of figured I'd get to filmmaking through music because I had a head start on music. And then I realized when I was there that all my peers were really just trying to survive as musicians, and I wanted to go a different direction. So I left there. But one of the things is that I wanted to communicate stories, and as a musician, you're communicating stories to other musicians in a way. You're not so much to the general public. And I wanted to do it visually through words and through visuals through film. So I left, came to California, continued my school education in film, making films, short films, and writing screenplays. Again, trying to tell the full story that people can see. Which includes music too. Music is included in the film experience. Then I ultimately, when I left school, I got a job as the assistant to a film director named Wolfgang Peterson, who directed Das Boot, one of my favorite films of all time for me. Also directed In the Line of Fire and Outbreak and Air Force One and Perfect Storm and The Never-Ending Story and a number of great films. So started off as his assistant, then I became the story editor there, and then the director of development. So I was a story guy, so I would take screenplays and help work this rewriting the screenplay with the writer. I wouldn't do the rewrites, but the writer would rewrite. I would write notes, and the script would get to a point where it can be shot, and where Wolfgang would direct the film, or we would produce the film with other directors. I did that for about 5 years, and then I left so I can continue writing, because that was about 5 years where I couldn't get any writing done. It was all 24/7 development work. And then I left.
You were getting other people writing done.
Yeah, it was other people. Yeah, I used to say, and I read thousands of screenplays, and I used to say for every terrible script I read, a vital childhood memory would disappear. Because I was stuffing so much information into my brain.
Yeah.
It served me, it was tough because I didn't get any writing done during that time, but it served me well, because when I did decide to sit down and write novels, I had read thousands of thriller scripts. And so the 3-act structure with escalating action and, with the climax and, and the pacing was all there. So I wrote a novel that very much had those components that you would see in not an action film, maybe a thriller film, and so that served me very well. And so by the time I wrote my first novel, and I'd already written 10 feature screenplays by then, my first novel didn't read like a first novel. It read like a polished, novel from all that I had done for the years, before that.
Yeah. And that's what we talked about on the first episode as well. So the way I'm thinking now is this: based on your story, your short story, you just told now, there is music, there is movies, and there is writing, of course, as you are a writer, and it all comes together. right? We were joking before start recording on how oftentimes people say, well, the book is better than the movie because you made your own movie in your own head. Now, some people may be better than other in creating these visuals in their head. Funny story when you connect it with music as well is I have books that I have read listening to music as a kid, and weird connection happened. Like if I listen to Asia, I don't know if you remember the band Asia from the 80s.
Back in the day, 80s.
Yeah, back in the days, I think about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the book, because I was listening to that. So don't ask me how my brain works, but it kind of trigged that memory, right? And other times you may choose maybe a more more a more efficient kind of music to go with it, with the specific topic that you're reading about. But hey, you know what? You can hear music and when you read, and you can imagine things. And so, is there anything connected in your mind when you write, and how you try to portray a visual, a scene, and how is it different if you're actually just writing for a book or if you're writing for an actual
film? Well, there's a big difference between writing a novel and writing a screenplay. When you're writing a screenplay, you're really writing an outline for a director's vision. I mean, you have your own vision as you write this screenplay and the story, and it's all you. It's all yours, as if you were writing a novel until you sell it. Okay. And then
until you hand it out.
Until you hand it away. And then it's not yours anymore. And the director is looking for something that they can look at and visualize. I mean, directors have a different way of, and I did some directing too, and I really enjoyed it. I love it. But I realize ultimately I'm more of a writer than a director. I see, when I'm talking to people, I see words in my head, and when someone says something, I'm like typing it out in my head, and I'm seeing a comma, and I'm seeing the exclamation point, and I'm like structuring it as I'm having a conversation with someone or listening to somebody, and that's just the way my head works, right? And directors are seeing everything visually. And I had a buddy who's a film director, and I gave him an assignment for a podcast thing we did, where I gave him the first paragraph of a friend's book, and I said, "How would you shoot that?" And he just kind of spilled off about 20 different shots that came from that paragraph in his head of where the camera would be, what he would see, and how it would cut, and it was just all boom, 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 boom. And I at that moment I thought, wow, this guy is a director. He sees in film, he sees in cuts and editing, whereas I see in language, I see in the written word. So when you write something, I mean, I try to create something that was very visual, so that if someone's reading my book, they'll see the movie in their head, but their movie is going to look a little different than what I'm imagining, just because I can't write every little thing, and there's no way that someone's going to want to take all that information anyway, and try to visualize it. So sometimes I don't give a lot of information on the way a character looks. There are some authors who really just kind of very scarce about how much information they put, very minimalistic, and they allow the reader to create that world. And so sometimes when that book then becomes a movie and it's a director's vision, the director puts it on film, the person who read the book will look at that and say, God, the book was so much better than the movie. And possibly it's because the interpreter of that book was that person, that viewer, that reader. And that was the filmmaker. He created the film in his head of the book, and the movie that the director made is not going to get anywhere close to what this individual had in his mind.
Yeah. It's interesting though. It's that I have learned, and I don't know if you have some information on this. I'm assuming you do. Is that not everybody see things in their head, visual, when you talk to them, or maybe less than other. I mean, you described that you see the word typing, and I'm imagine that I could see your face and these words coming around your head with the exclamation point and stuff, and and I remember when we actually used to hang out together, I used to do a lot of design at the time. And I would try to describe, like advertising in that case, like, okay, so this is what we could do to represent this. And I would say, I'd try to explain with words what I was envisioning. And some people will be like, oh yeah, that's cool. Let's do that. Some other will be like, draw a blank
Right.
and be like, wait, can you just give me a visual? Can you draft this for me? And I realized we don't all,
Yeah, perceive things.
we don't
Right.
all have the same brain. It doesn't work for everybody
Yeah.
the same way. And it's amazing how then you talk to somebody that is a director and it's like, yeah, he sees the world by different angles, different shots, and in different lighting. And, and that's really cool because we are all kind of different. But I think that's why some people that may not have the visual when they read the book, they'd rather watch the movie and say, that's the movie.
It's the way they perceive, the way they perceive the world. I think there's more of that as time has gone on. There's fewer readers, fewer people are reading. People want very short content. They want short content on the internet, even if it's visual. So even the movie length has gotten shortened. Our attention span is shorter. I run into fewer and fewer people who read. And so now everyone is thinking about visual and people who, when I see people write today too, for the most part, there's a lot of people that just take shortcuts in their writing, but it was just that they're not disciplined in their writing because they don't have to be so much. It's something that's a different media now.
It is. You're right.
To me. So, which is kind of depressing. I feel like I'm writing for a smaller and smaller niche group of people who really want to sit and read something, want to take a whole, couple of weeks out of their life to sit down and just get lost in the story. Most people in the US at least just don't have time for that anymore, to let their head go someplace. And if they maybe got a couple hours to watch a movie or to binge a TV series, but to sit in their own head, in their own space and just focus on a written work. I mean, even for me, I've lost a little bit of patience for it. I don't want to read something that isn't going to kind of really blow my mind. I want to be very, very engaged in what I'm reading. So I want to read really good work. And that's tends to be harder and harder to find these days, but it's out there.
So, it's also harder. It's like, I am more of an audiobook kind of guy now. I kind of like train my brain with podcast and listening when I walk the dogs. I just consume way more. I have the biggest audible credit that I can get for the year, and I usually go through it. Because I consume so much more in that way, and my brain now can read by listening. But of course, when I get the chance to read, I do enjoy doing that. And I feel like, I don't know. I mean, you're still committing a lot when you watch an entire TV series that you binge. I mean, in those 10 hours or 8 hours, you can hear a book. You can read a book.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
I don't know. But it's different.
It's a choice.
It's a different preference. It's a different choice.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love binging TV series too. I'm watching Silo right now, and I'm loving it. And we just watched Arcane.
I was tempted to look at that. Yeah.
Some good stuff. Good writing in Silo. Also Arcane, which is an animated series based on a video game. I never thought I'd get into, but my kids got me into it. And then and it's just it's really well written. The writing is exceptional. Characters are great. So when it comes down to story can be in anything. And I do love good animation too. So
and that's actually something interesting as well. That's video gaming has become also a different way of storytelling, which is different than directing or writing a script for a movie. I had a guy that he writes fantasy that his trilogy was turning into a video game. And
that's interesting.
And I said, how do you deal with that in accepting whatever adaptation in the media you do? And he said to me, I just don't look at it.
Right.
It's like
Production offers.
I just
Right.
gonna trust the director of the video games to kind of like what you did. You said about the
Yeah.
director of the movie. At that point, it's your vision,
Yeah.
uh, right?
It becomes something else. And if he's written the novel, he still has the novel. The novel's still up on the shelves. And if someone says, "God, your video game sucked," you can say, that was not me. I have the novel. The novel's right here if you want to read
Yeah,
it. You know. So
yeah,
he still made that create. He created this piece that can be engaged in. You
yeah.
know.
Yeah, you know
Wink.
what? While we are on it, I'll give you some example. Like I'd rather read the book in general. There are some movies that never been a book before, but I'll give you an example. I love Tim Burton, The Nightmare Before Christmas.
No,
It's for
I
me,
love it.
it's the
Great.
Halloween and
And
Christmas, which is
Christmas.
my
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
favorite things,
Yeah.
and put together, and I
Yeah.
just love it. So that's something I
It's
watch.
got everything. It's got great music. It's got a great story, great
I
characters.
listen to the soundtrack any time of the year, Danny
Yeah.
Elfman, and there is also a version that is made by other band, like all covers, which I also
Huh.
love.
Okay.
When you have corns,
Yeah.
playing the three tricksters, and
Great.
it's pretty cool. But what I'm saying is, I'm like this year I said I want to see if there is a book version because I wanted to walk around and listen to it, and I did find it. And it
Huh.
was an adaptation made by a writer, which is I don't remember the name right now, but she's a New York bestseller writer, and
Yeah.
she rewrote it, and I could tell because I've seen the movie so many times that she just reinterpreted in words what the visual was, and
Yeah.
she did an amazing job. Like
Mm.
listening, and the actor that is doing the voiceover, it's amazing. He does all
Huh.
the voices. That was a great
Interesting.
adaptation, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Other
Yeah.
times, not so good. Like give you an example, Ready Player One,
Yeah.
which is I love that movie because it's all about technology and
Yeah.
virtual world. When I saw the movie, I was like, that is not even the book.
Hmm.
It's not even it's not even the story of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the concept,
Right.
but it became
Something
something
else.
else. I,
Yeah.
I couldn't watch it.
Yeah.
So I don't know how
Well,
you
it's interesting. I
feel.
mean, that's the way Arcane is in the sense in that it came off a video game, League of Legends, and the video game doesn't have much story. You know, it's just this. They so the writer had to then create a whole new world and create the story and this relationship between these two sisters and everything that makes it magical and wonderful really came out of the writers for the TV series. So they took something that could have easily failed. And so if someone did just like a true adaptation of the video game to film, it would be or TV. It could be very dry and boring and nothing's going on. So they had to be completely take the concept of the video game and turn that into something absolutely new. And then it became, because it was so well written, it became a very popular, successful series. But it's obvious, concept is, when I was working for Wolfgang Peterson, we would buy a screenplay, and everyone in Hollywood would do this too. Sometimes you buy a screenplay just for concept, not for this. Like the screenplay could be kind of poorly written, but the concept would be unique and interesting. And so you'd buy that screenplay, you'd give the original screenwriter an opportunity to change that screenplay to the vision of the director, let's say, or the development team. So you give him an opportunity him or her to rewrite the piece based on your notes. And if they don't accomplish that after a couple of rewrites, we would get other writers to come in and now, again, the original writer loses the opportunity to work on his piece or her piece. It's taken out of their hands and given to other screenwriters that can execute the story that the director wants to tell based on the concept of the screenplay that they bought.
See, I don't. I feel like some people are very protective of their job, and some other they're just happy that they had the good idea that
Yeah.
inspires someone else. As when I do like a creative direction, and I say, here's an idea, then I can take, I can tell the copywriter in the past when I was doing advertising and say, all right, get the concept, now give me your vision. The copywriter will write something, the designer, illustrator will illustrate something. And if you start micromanaging, I feel like you're going to have something that it's just not good. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like everybody has a place, but some people don't want to let it go. They want to have that full control on it. And I don't know. I mean, I can think about a lot of books that turn into a movie that you realize that you have to. It's a different media. It's
Yeah.
Right.
It's so different that usually the instincts of the author in that adaptation aren't really aligned with the process that is required. I mean, you've got a, 350, 400 page novel. It's got to become a 110 page screenplay. So things change. They have to change to tell the story. So basically, the good adapter of that work has to look at what is the main thrust. What's the real kind of ultimate story that's being told in this book that I cannot adapt at 400 pages. How do I turn this into the microcosm of that book? And oftentimes it means eliminating characters, combining characters, finding the real through line of the piece. What do we really need? What is the author really trying to tell us in the book? And how do we accomplish it through visuals and through a shorter medium? So that's what oftentimes the author will fight against, that because they want to have everything in the book represented in the film, and there's just no way to do that. It's possible it can be done as a series. If you're talking about like a 10-part series, you might be able to get everything in, but you're still going to have to make new content for it to work as a series than from a book. Things change, and you just kind of have to realize it's a different medium.
Yeah, I think you need to be understanding of that, because you just can't. Like we can go in. Let's connect with the music of it.
Yeah.
Like there is the soundtrack of a movie. You write a soundtrack of a movie. We were talking about Danny Elfman for
Right.
Nightmare Before Christmas, but we didn't talk about a lot of amazing writer and composers.
Yeah. John Williams, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking John Williams, and and all
classic.
the movie that he did, and I think it's also very different when you write a soundtrack, which is based on the visual that is being given to you.
Yeah.
It's very much different than if you write your own piece, where maybe the visual is in your head. And I think it's a different, like what is that you feed first? Do you feed the visual, or do you feed the music, or do you feed the words?
That's a good question for those who do that.
No, I know.
Because I can imagine. I mean, from my experience,
Yeah.
I can guess the process they're going through. But I think it really is a combination of. I mean, to do like scores that are beautiful. I'm like Randy Newman's score for the movie Avalon is beautiful music. We used one of the songs from that album, from that soundtrack in my wedding with my wife and I. We had a small band that played one of the songs. It was so beautiful, the waltz, and it's just gorgeous. But Randy Newman looked at the movie, and then he created something that exists beyond the movie. And that when you can do that, it services the film, but it exists on its own as a great, musical work, that's really doing everything. And there's not a lot that you can take and just listen to the music separate from the movie too. But there are guys like John Williams, and you listen to the soundtrack to Star Wars, and it's interesting. The themes, they support each character has his or her own theme. And it's really brilliant.
It's beautiful storytelling. And then there is the soundtrack that it just goes with the movie. Like, have you ever seen those
It
situations?
supports it.
Have you ever seen those things where they're like, maybe like I don't know, like a Shining or Halloween or like a very scary movie.
Yeah.
But you take the sound effect and the music that tells you that something is about to happen, and all of a sudden it's not scary anymore.
Yes, right. Yeah. That's when the music is just supporting the action or something, and it's important. But also, music can ruin a film. I mean,
Oh,
if it's
yeah.
if it's poorly conceived as far as how it should be invisible in a sense. The music
Yeah.
should just be there, and you don't even realize that you're being led along musically through a scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but sometimes the music is overpowering and it's trying to do too much and it's not supporting the scene. In fact, it's contrapuntal. It runs counterpoint to what.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in. I don't know if there was a Coppola film. I think it was A Time to Kill. I saw years and years ago, and I heard the music, and I was just like, "This music is killing me. It's just not supporting the film."
Time to kill. It's killing
It's a time to kill. Time to kill the film. So,
Well, let's go into musicality.
okay.
I think, I mean, I love how we're freestyling and just having a conversation about creative
Yeah.
arts in general.
Yeah.
But when I mentioned at the beginning that you have this teaching, I
Yeah.
think it's a lesson that you do. It's a
Yeah, I did
series of
it. Well,
lesson.
this was my graduate school lecture, basically.
Okay.
I went to graduate school late after I'd written my novels. I wanted to get an MFA so that I could teach at the university level, and so I went back to UC Riverside. They got a phenomenal department for writing, and so this was my lecture that I did. I did on the musicality of writing,
Right. But you
which
also told me that you do use it regularly when you write. It's
well, when I
concept.
write, yes,
Yeah.
this is
So
kind of what
tell me
what's
more
in my
about
head.
that one. Yeah.
So basically, I realized that I was trying to figure out what made my writing different than other writers, let's say. And it's not there are other writers that write this way too. If you have a musical background, I think you tend to lean on it. And my writing is really influenced by studying music and playing music growing up. And so I took a step back and tried to analyze what was going on in my writing, and I realized that when I'm writing a sentence, I'm thinking about it rhythmically and musically, and it's not there's no harmony, or melody, but there's a rhythm to a sentence. So if you break it all the way down to like, let's say one word, like the word piccolo, there's consonants and vowels in that word, and in musical terms, there's a staccato and legato, right? So pick is like a staccato. It's a consonant to pick right there. Pick olo is legato. Olo. So you put them together, you get staccato and legato, piccolo. And you've got kind of a musical word. So if you think about that, okay, there's plenty of words that have staccato and legato involved in it. So if I start to string them along in a sentence, you can really do something. So the word itself, piccolo, is also musically, it's a triplet, piccolo, that's a triplet. So let's say you say, holding my piccolo, that's two triplets. Holding my is one triplet, piccolo is the other triplet. So now I've got holding my piccolo. You've got kind of escalating action or music rhythm, let's say escalating rhythm, and now it wants to go somewhere, it wants to kind of rest. So let's say if you put a word like high, holding my piccolo high. Now I've got two triplets, holding my piccolo high. I'm resting on a quarter note, and I've got a nice little musical or rhythmic sentence, holding my piccolo high. Now, if you wrote that as holding my piccolo in the air, then maybe you've got kind of a clunky sentence, and you go, well, why is that a clunky sentence? Holding my piccolo in the air. It's like it's dragging on a little bit, But so when I go and I rewrite, so I've written a novel or something, I'm going and doing some rewrites, I might see a sentence that says holding my piccolo in the air, and I can say, how can I make that sound a little bit better, a little tighter, a little more rhythmic? Well, I'll just change it to holding my piccolo high. Now that's one sentence in the entire novel that you've adapted to something more rhythmic, and it reads better. These things read better. Another wonderful example I always love to talk about is from the Warren Zevon song, Werewolves of London. And the sentence is, little old lady got mutilated late last night. Little old lady got mutilated late last night. Great fucking sentence, okay?
Wow.
That's triplets. Little old lady got. That's two triplets. Little old lady got mutilated. So that's four eighth notes. Mutilated late last night, and that's like those are like eighth notes with coming off the offbeat. Late last night. That sentence itself basically tells you how to read the sentence. The musicality of the sentence. You can almost not read it any other way than little old lady got mutilated late last night. You almost can't
Well,
read it any other way.
you also have the D and the T that it's almost like using the right notes.
Yes, you're using like notes.
It's not
You've got the
just
staccato, you got the
yeah.
legato, you got everything in that. I mean, I've always loved that sentence. I think it's a great way to think about, and that's in a song, so they're using it musically, but it's rhythmically just as a sentence itself.
That's really cool. So people may listen to it right now and be like, God, that's a lot of work when you're like
Yeah,
that's a lot to think when you're also trying to make sense. And to me, you're kind of describing how and you connect it with the music
yeah,
when you're writing a song. Like it's like songwriting in
yeah,
a way in your head, but
yeah,
it doesn't. Then you don't put the music to it, but you put the music into the rhythm of the
yeah.
words. It's kind of like poetry in a way,
It's like
right?
poetry. Yeah, yeah.
Isn't it
Poetry.
too complicated to think about all of that while you're
Well,
writing?
I don't think about it.
You just do it.
Well, fortunately, I've had a lot because of the musical background.
Mm-hmm.
It comes natural, but and I don't think about it generally when I'm writing. But when I come back to rewrite, and I'm looking at a paragraph that's bugging me because it's kind of clunky, then
Right.
I can. So it serves well for kind of the rewrite stage.
Right.
But I'm not really thinking about, okay, I've got triplets here, I've got staccato and legato. It's just that's the way it evolves. But if you don't have that kind of background, then it's a good way to analyze your work and say, how can I make this paragraph a little more energetic, and a
So
little less
so I'm
clunky.
gonna ask you an opinion. Like, well, you familiar with the movie Ratatouille?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So everybody can cook. I
yeah,
use that a lot.
okay,
And talking about a great soundtrack, Joaquino there, it
yeah,
really makes you feel like you're in Paris half
yeah,
the time.
yeah,
So everybody can cook, but not everybody can be a 5-star Michelin cook.
yeah,
So everybody can write, everybody can write music, everybody can play.
right,
How do you feel about that as a teacher as
right.
well?
Well,
To
yeah,
you it comes natural,
yeah,
this,
yeah.
and to some people may not come natural. What you do?
Well, it's like it's like filmmaking, directing. Uh, I can do that. If I did it more and more and more, I become a better and better film director, and I can maybe start to see the world the way my friend, the film director, sees the world. Doing it enough. So some of it comes down to just doing it a lot. Doing your work, doing your writing over and over again, and listening to people. Um, but ultimately, yeah, there's an innate sense of being able to have a voice. What it comes down to is like, if you have a voice as a filmmaker, director, an editor, or whatever, or as a writer, um, that voice will translate into your expertise, I guess. Uh, and you can't really teach voice. Voice has to kind of be learned. It's either there from the beginning, or it's learned over perhaps years of listening to other people's voices. So, if you're a writer, you've got to read. You've got to read other people's work. You got to read great work. You got to read work that you respect, that really speaks to you, and then you're going to be influenced by that. You're not going to copy that. Maybe early on you might try copying it here and there, but you want to be influenced by other writers and their work and their voices, and then you will gradually develop your own voice, and then that is the thing that can't really be taught in a class. I can't sit there and teach someone to have a voice. I can steer them in the right direction. You know, what do you like to read? And maybe I can recommend books to read, and I can explain why this is a great book to read or to listen to or whatever. Um, and then that person might develop the ear for the voice in themselves, and then at some point their work captures that thing that is almost unteachable.
Mm.
And it happens in everything. I mean, Charlie Parker, when he was, the story of Charlie Parker when he was a young musician, and and he was jamming someplace in a bar and a club, and the band leader threw a cymbal at him, told him to get the hell off stage because he couldn't do it. And then he went off and he went to his grandma's woodshed and he did something what we call woodshedding now, which is like getting your shit together and really becoming a musician. And he worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and worked for I don't know how long, years, I guess. And then he came back and he was Charlie Parker. He had a voice.
Right. But also you got to feel where you're more naturally inclined, right? I think that the message of the cooking, the message of the teaching, the message of the practicing, I feel like you got to find your vocation too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, talking about, a style of writing, and I mean, not everybody can be a certain kind of writer. Everybody can write, but maybe you're trying to go somewhere else. Maybe you're playing the wrong instrument, or if there is such a thing. Like, I can take the guitar and screw around, but if I sit at the piano or I take the bass, I think I'm better. I'm still not stage material, but it comes more natural to me, the rhythmic of it, or maybe because it requires more technique that I don't have, the guitar, but whatever, but find what comes easy maybe to you, and then make that, then go in the wood shredder and become that maybe.
It's interesting because I spent so many years playing music, and I'm ultimately not a very good musician. It's just like, I went to a jazz school and everything, but ultimately it just wasn't the natural thing for me. There's some folks that will pick up,
and that's okay. I think,
and that's okay. I found the thing that was.
That's okay.
Yeah. It led me to the thing that I realized, I've been writing since I was a kid, and it's really the writing that where I shine.
Yeah.
But it was frustrating to think that I spent so many years in music, and it's still like, it doesn't click with me. But it clicks in a different way. It clicks in language, so that I use the musical aspect in my writing. It's interesting how it influences it.
Yeah.
But I would still like to get on stage and really, and be an exceptional musician, which I'm not, and so I still have aspirations. I bought a bass guitar, electric bass, and as soon as I get my next novel finished, I'm going to take lessons on the electric bass and hopefully, be able to go on stage someday doing that.
Yeah. The reason why I went there is because when you were describing the musicality of the way that you write, and I think for you, it does come natural, but you also have the practice and the experience of knowing music. But then when you do write and you go through your writing and you find a point where there is a hiccup, right? It doesn't flow, and you're like, all right, I got to work on this. And you can see it. It's like if you listen to music again, and you hear a note that it's just shouldn't be there. It doesn't flow. You got to change that, right? I mean, and what I'm saying is, not everybody's gonna hear that note. Not everybody's gonna notice that.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes we just want to be too perfectionist for ourselves.
Yes.
And the average reader is not caring about that.
That's true. I mean, you can still publish. A lot of people are self-publishing, and they're not going through the rigorous editing process that that the novelists of an earlier time in my day. And I don't self-publish. I mean, I self-published some short stories and poetry recently, but for the most part, my novels, I go through that vetting process, which is very difficult. You got to get through your agent, and I spent years writing my recent novel, and then finally gave it to my agent, me thinking that it was ready to go, and my agent comes back with 8 pages of notes that require a full rewrite and a lot of rethinking. And it's like, okay, so you got to get outside of your own head. You got to get feedback from others around you who you respect, other writers, other professionals. And then once I've satisfied my agent's notes with the next draft, and once he's satisfied and sends it out in the industry, and let's say it gets purchased by a publisher, then I'm going to have to deal with the editor's notes, and the editor's notes might see a whole different blind side that me and my agent didn't see, and require another 3 months of intense rewriting before the editor feels that it's ready to be published. So that I go through all of that, whereas some, in today's age, someone can just write their very first draft of a book and self-publish it, and that's it. They're done. They're a published author. The downside of that is that that's obviously not their best work, and they'll never learn to get to their best work, except for maybe trial and error over many, many novels that they self-publish. They can maybe get to their best work, but this rigorous vetting process and editing process makes you into a professional. It slows you down, unfortunately, but if you're trying to write something that
do you ever feel though that the feedback that you get, it's like, this is, I see what you're saying, but this is not what I meant?
It's interesting because when I was in the film industry, we were working with a guy named Jerry DePago, who's a wonderful screenwriter. He wrote the novel Phenomenon. I mean, not the novel, the screenplay for the movie Phenomenon, and some other things. But he was a professional. He's good. He was in his 50s, and he had a draft of his script, and he had a meeting with the film director and the producers and development execs, and they gave him all these notes, about how they wanted him to change the script. And then when he came back from this meeting, I asked him, so how did that go? I kind of knew that he was going to go into that kind of meeting. And he said, well, it's interesting because they didn't give me the right direction. They didn't see what I was trying to say, but by the fact that they had so much to say points me in the direction that there's something that needs to change. Right?
I see that. That's cool.
So he said it's his job to figure out how to make it work based on the feedback that he got. But the feedback that he got were not coming from writers. They're coming from people that aren't involved in that day-to-day process of writing story, right? So Gerald had to interpret what they said and try to get to what they really meant, and how to make the story, change the story. So same thing when you get your notes from your agent or you get your notes from your editor. Sometimes they're looking at something that's not working, right? And you got to figure out, okay, why is it not working for my editor? This editor's done great work in the past. Something's bugging him. He thinks it's this, but I can't really just change that. I can't take that note and change it because it everything before it and everything after that note is affected by that change. So I have to interpret how to address the note and how to satisfy it, so that when he reads it again, he'll say, "Oh yeah, that's not really what I was thinking, but it works."
Right, and I think that's the key, right? Because, and I'm gonna stop the conversation because we're at 47 minutes, and I know
it always goes by so fast, doesn't
and
it?
have more coffee and have even lunch here, but we should.
You did have lunch.
We should do that in person one of these days.
Yeah.
But because now I go into the question, which I don't want you to answer, but maybe would be the topic for next conversation around a few other things. But when is a work really finished, right? You can take a painting. I know that there are, typical example, I think Leonardo da Vinci had the Mona Lisa with him for years and years and years, even to the day that he died in France. And it was never finished for him. But at a certain point, it was finished. And maybe there are other painters and there are other writers that they never feel like the job is done the way it's supposed to be. But I feel like, or a song. But my point is that there is a lot of different ways to do a great job.
Yeah.
And a great job could be different.
Yep.
Depending on, I don't know, something you read the day before, or the way you feel, or who is criticizing it, or who is your agent, or what direction you're going. I think that's a very, very existential question for any artist.
Yeah.
Like, when is my job done? Really?
Right. Yeah.
Is it just because you have to, because you have a contract that say, give me 3 books in 3 years or whatever it is, or?
Yeah.
I mean, would George Lucas go and do Star Wars the first 3 differently? I don't know.
I hope not.
would like to ask him. I hope not, but I would like to ask him. He probably would.
Yeah.
Like knowing then what he knows now, but maybe it would have been worse. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he's had plenty of opportunities to to rework the different versions of Star Wars, and I actually think his first, original first, second, and third films were the best as far as storytelling is concerned.
I agree.
So I think,
wasn't a big fan of the following three. So
nope.
not at all.
And I can think you can also get lost in it. You can lose sight of really what you're trying to do when you get so involved in it. Yeah. And when there's no one to say no, and there's no one to criticize. I mean, no one's going to criticize him after the success of Star Wars. Everyone says yes. So where's the pushback? Where's the, who's going to be brave enough to go up to him and say, Mr. Lucas, I think that, your characters need to have a stronger arc, and I don't really know who this character. And it's like, you can either listen to that person and say, wow, thank God someone's finally giving me some feedback, or you can just shut that person out and say, listen, who are you?
Yeah, but I think knowing that you never finish learning, and you're always progressing in your art, I think it's what makes you a great artist.
Yeah, and you move on. You move on to the next thing. You do have to finish something, and you do have to call it done. I mean, when the book is published and it's on the shelves, it's kind of done. It's like whatever you got in there is what's in there. Unless you're going to do
the bag.
Yeah. So then you move on to the next thing, and you say, okay,
right?
Yeah.
Well, that's maybe the answer, but I still want to talk about it more
in
a philosophical perspective.
Yeah.
When we talk next time, and maybe we'll pick something else as well.
Yeah.
Steve, I always had so much fun. I mean, it's gonna become a Saturday morning tradition, recording and having a cup of coffee, and I really enjoy it. I hope the audience enjoy it as well. And,
We'll call it the two guys in black shirts. This is.
I know we have to have a black shirt.
Black T-shirt.
I mean, that's kind of like when one day you decide I don't want to decide the color anymore. I think Steve Jobs did that, and a few others. It's like, I just have a drawer full of black shirts.
That's what I've got too. That's all I got.
It works. It works on camera. There's got to be a reason. It works in theater as well. All right, cool. Stephen, thank you so much. I hope people are enjoying our chats about writing and creative work in general. And if you do, let us know. Leave a comment and let us know if you have questions or if you want us to talk about something else. And if you don't like it, don't leave comments. No, it's fine.
What we could do is we can get some comments and suggestions from the audience that we can talk about the next time we get together.
Absolutely. I love that. Some questions will be great. So hopefully they will do that. They will click the subscribe button and they stay tuned on Audio Signals podcast for more stories and more time to share with the two black t-shirt guys.
Yeah.
How about that?
I like it.
All right. Stephen, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for listening. Until the next one.
All right.
This is a special announcement. We are heading to RSA conference in San Francisco for our 11th years of coverage, April 28, May 1st.
And as always, we're bringing you keynotes, conversations with organizers, speakers, industry leaders, plus the latest insights from the world of cybersecurity.
And we'll reconnect with old friends, meet new ones, and of course, we want you and your company to join us.
We have a few spots left for full sponsorship and our on-location briefings. You can book yours now at itspmagazine.com/RSAC.
We're going.
And you're coming with us.